Hello there. Happy Friday. I'm Dr. Jill Wener. I'm a physician, meditation teacher, tapping practitioner. I'm an author, and I'm an aspiring anti-racist, which requires continuous self-examination and learning. And I am so excited to hear today. I have Nicholas Landers. He is a career teacher. He's taught in 3 different continents, and he's now a motivational speaker and author and also podcaster. You should check out his podcast. I'll put the links in the show notes. Nicholas, or Nick, is great to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hey, Jill. Thank you. I'm excited to be here and discuss anti-racism with you. And, I know we had a conversation last time on my podcast, and so I'm just happy to be with you right now.
Awesome. Yeah, we've gotten into it, a couple long conversations, so it's exciting. It's fun to be back on, asking you the questions, because it's like more comfortable for me to ask questions and let you speak. So today is Casual Friday. When I was on your podcast, you were like, well, I'm gonna wear something nice for yours. And I'm like, that's crazy. Let's just be who we are, and show up as we are. So we're doing Casual Friday, which is kind of every day during COVID, but it's nice to just kind of do what we're doing. I did put on some earrings for the event, but so I'd like to just, we were just talking before we started recording, and I think on both of our minds is the day-to-day experience of what it's like to be of different races in this country. Going through life day to day, what do you experience as a Black man, and what do I experience as a white woman, and how do they differ? And if we understood more about what that was like for people, might we have a better conversation and openness and willingness to understand the impacts of systemic racism and what it does to people of color. So what are your thoughts on that? That's, I know, a very broad question, but your experience as a day-to-day living life as a Black man? I know certain things I have to do as a woman. I'm always going to be thinking about that. It's always in the back of my mind. I think multiply that times 7 billion, and it's going to be what you have to think about. So what is it like that you have to prepare yourself for and think about as you go through life?
That's a good question, and I'm glad we get to talk about this and to be honest about what it's really like. And I don't want to paint it as something bleak. Obviously, it's 2020. It's not the same as, the 1950s or the 1800s. It's not like that. But as a Black male, I do have to be cognizant of sometimes, if I go to the mall, actually a good example is I went to the mall maybe 2 months ago. And you have to kind of be aware of following too closely behind people, even if you're just shopping. There are people who kind of turn their shoulders and they kind of distance themselves, or they slow down to tie their shoes and kind of look up at you as you're going by, and you're like, I'm not here for you to attack you. But you're always thinking of your presentation and how you're viewed. And, I go to the gym every morning, and I try to look, decent, going into the gym, because I just don't want to convey a certain image. And I think that's the biggest piece. It's always, what do I look like to you? Right? Because it's not a matter of how I feel about myself, and I can know I'm a quality, decent human being, but it's always, I have to prove myself. And no matter where I go, if I'm pumping gas, if I'm at the mall, at work, I always feel like I'm just on, you know what I mean?
What toll does that take on you to have to always be on?
On, I feel like is present something other than me, or present something to represent my race is more to it. I always feel like there's, the media is going to paint you a certain way, in the movies and the stories they've heard, and they're going to pass these things down. And so that's what you're fighting against before they can get to know you. I give you an example, and we just spoken about this a split second ago, but I used to date someone, and she was half white, half Puerto Rican, but when she left the house, she's recognized as white. They just see her as that.
Mm-hmm.
And she was telling me, when you meet my family, one side of my family, they're not so progressive and open and tolerant. And can you handle that? And I kind of laughed, because she was so concerned for me, and I appreciated that. But that's not something that really concerned me because that's what I do daily. I have to navigate a world where racism exists and discrimination exists, and it can be overt or it can be subtle. But Black people and people of color in general have to be, they have to assimilate and be nuanced in their thinking and in how they represent themselves. And so there's me, Nick Landers, and then there's me, Nick Landers, as a Black man. Then there's me, Nick Landers, as we accept him as a Black man who is something other than our image of Black people.
Interesting, yeah.
And I have to live in these different worlds and balance myself. And so what I mean to be on is like, I can never forget what color I am and where I am and what I'm doing, because all those things communicate different things to different people.
It's so, yeah, it's plays to that notion of like white people assume that they're like kind of devoid of race, like the world is us, and then there's other races, and white people not understanding that they carry race with them as well everywhere they go. And that lack of understanding and awareness is very dangerous, and it's very harmful in a lot of ways. Assuming that like, oh, if I didn't grow up around Black people, therefore I'm stupid about race, or I'm ignorant, or was protected or sheltered from issues of race. And it's so not true, but that's the way that our white supremacy culture kind of conditions us, is to think, because you don't have to think about it if you're only around white people, and you don't have to think about it in your own self otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, and I know a lot of people don't like the word privilege, but I mean, that's very much what it is in a way, when your race, or when you get to see yourself at the top levels of society in every industry, you've become the standard. And what you're passing on and the laws you make and so on, and your views, you have people competing not for excellence or competence, but whiteness. And I think that's what's so dangerous about it, where sometimes people will implicit bias and so on, and how they've grown up, they'll look at it and say, I'm not being racist. This isn't racist at all. But it is, because it's a mindset. History is carried over, and bias is carried over to where it's so subtle now and so nuanced that it's like it's invisible. And then we talk about cognitive dissonance, where somebody will then say something like, I bought a Kanye West album, how can I be racist? I watched the NFL and play basketball, and you guys represented there. How can racism still exist? And I think that speaks to the power of racism as an institution, as something that's systemic, where your way of thinking is prevalent everywhere to reinforce your beliefs already.
So what do you say to people who are like, yeah, I voted for Obama, or I liked Hamilton, so I'm not racist? Like, I'm down with the Black George Washington. I'm super cool now. How do you respond? And how do people respond back to you?
Drake, the musician, the artist, the rapper, he has a line that says, if you say you're down, you have to show me. And I think what he means by that is that if we're together, if we're in this thing together, if you really love me and respect me and care about me, then you have to demonstrate that love for me. And when I hear people say different things like that, or I'm down, or what's up, brother, and they give me a fist or whatever they're going to do, I need proof, right? I need skin in the game. And I think that's the point of anti-racism, is where if you're an anti-racist, that's actually a very dangerous place for you to be. For you to come out and say, hey, I'm for equality. And I'm with standing up against people of my tribe who may have conflicting views. Last night you had the Texans and the Chiefs play, and they had their the moment of silence, or the moment of unity, I think they called it, and people booed. You know, and that too is a demonstration. Like, you showed me something when you did that, right? In the same way that somebody can say Black Lives Matter and they can plant a sign in your yard. Is it going to cost you anything? Your love for me, right? And I think when you love somebody, you really care about them, you stand with them regardless. You know, you take the hits with them. And I think, you know, white supremacy and cognitive dissonance and all those different things is a way for people to say, here are the pieces that I choose to accept. And I'm going to accept all good things, but the negative side, the parts that can hurt me and my finances or my health or so on, or my position in this company, I'm going to, you know, disassociate from that and just pick piecemeal what I want from Black culture and so on. And then that gets into cultural appropriation. And again, but in short, for people who say they're with it, you know, you have to show me, and you have to be at risk. You have to risk as much as we do, people of color.
So it's interesting because when I did this anti-racism retreat back in March of 2019, and I loved it. I mean, it was incredible, and I learned so much, and was like completely dismantled my ego, like shattered it several times, and opened my eyes so much. And I got back, and I remember writing this blog post. I think I actually wrote it while I was there, about systemic racism and like we're all racist and all this stuff. And I remember I sent it out to my mailing list, which I've like, you know, nurtured over the last 4+ years since I've been a meditation teacher. And I remember writing at the end, like, I know you're used to hearing about meditation and stuff from me. Don't worry. I'm not going to be flooding your inbox with stuff about racism, but this is just where I'm at right now. And then I looked back at that and I was like, ew, why was I apologizing? I mean, I know why, because of white supremacy culture, but I was apologizing for speaking out about race and like afraid that people wouldn't want to hear from me anymore if I did, and that I might lose some. And then, so then the next time I posted about it, I was like, hey, last time I wrote about this, I apologized, and I am never going to apologize for speaking about this again. Like, here's my, here's my truth. And honestly, like, it's not like all these people are like buying stuff from me anyway, but even if they were, if they don't want to engage with me because I'm talking about race, then I don't want to be engaging with them.
Yeah.
You know, if they don't have, if they aren't able to do that, then like, bye. But it's this weird thing that's so hard for white people to like take that stand. And there's like levels of taking a stand. So I totally see what you're saying. It's like, well, show me anti-racist, you know, and I think it's really easy to call yourself an anti-racist, but then to actually do the work and realize it's not just a title, it's not just a designation, but it's a living. And there's a million times per day that I'm not being an anti-racist.
Yeah.
You know, like, but it's every decision I make, everything I say is either racist or anti-racist. Do you have thoughts about that?
I think that's a good starting point. It's a good place to be. You know, obviously you put yourself at risk. You put yourself out there to be criticized and receive some feedback. And the fact that you're thinking, is this a moment where I can be an anti-racist, or am I conscious of it? Am I not? This is how people of color feel on a daily basis. So by you doing that and getting your feet wet, you are, you know, getting into the culture and empathizing and realizing that Black people are also doing the same things. It's not something that's totally different in reality, because what we do is, Black people, believe it or not, also think, is this racism? You know, just because you have a bad encounter with somebody at a Starbucks and they were rude to you does not mean it's racism. It just could mean a disgruntled employee, and we move on. And that's a common thread through any kind of injustice, whether it's, you know, sexism, ageism, whatever it's going to be, or, you know, against your religion. Can you pinpoint what exactly is racism or so on, is sexism? And the fact that we had to think about what it is to, oh, should we be aggressive about this and say something? Or is this something else and we should be quiet about it? And I think white people, the conundrum is, having grown up in multicultural neighborhoods and so on, and have friends, different ethnicities in different places in the world. It's, you they're not racist, but they've been socialized into it. And so sometimes in their heart, that they're not bad people, but they can say and do things to offend you. And even then, in those spaces, you have to pick and choose how to highlight some of those things. Mm-hmm. So again, for you to speak up and to challenge the status quo, whether that's in your household or at work or at the gym, wherever you are, and be unapologetic about it and say, here's my view, because we need that. And I think what we've suffered from in this country is that a lot of this division and miscommunication is that we're not having the difficult conversations. Mm-hmm. We want to do everything else. We want to change Aunt Jemima around. We want to change Uncle Ben's. We want to put Black Lives Matter on the street. We want to put it on a basketball court, except doing something tangible that puts people's money at risk, people's safety at risk. Because I think on the white side, I hate to keep putting it like that, but there's a certain level that people will go to and say, but I don't want my freedom challenged, and I don't want my safety challenged. But that's what everybody else is doing daily. And people will say, well, like police injustice and police violence, brutality. Someone goes out and they don't have to be committing some major offense. They don't have to have warrants. Sandra Bland failed to put on her blinker and she's dead. Mm-hmm. You got the Tamir Rice with a fake gun and somebody called and said it was fake probably. And you just got out of the car and shot them. Like, you don't have to be doing something insanely heinous to lose your life and to be at risk. Yeah. And I think other people have to start saying, hey, me putting my job on the line is nothing compared to someone else whose life is constantly in jeopardy in just almost any situation, police or otherwise. Like George Zimmerman, not a police officer, just a regular neighborhood cop, not even a cop, vigilante, So.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating to me, like looking back at my own discomfort and looking back at my, the stages of, because now I'll talk about it all the time and I have no problem talking about it. But at first it felt like this big thing, I don't want to be too much of this. And someone asked me to be on their podcast to talk about race. And they're not normally talking about that. And they were like, we don't want to get too controversial and we don't want to do it. And I was like, I think we should, and they were like, you know what, we're right. But like, if I hadn't pushed back, we would have just like kept it super, not upsetting anyone and not, we don't want it to be too in your face. One of the interviews I did with a woman named Crystal McCreary, she said, and this is something that she was paraphrasing that she had heard elsewhere, but for any time any person, but a white person leans into their discomfort, you're giving someone else the space to back away from theirs, which I thought was so beautiful. It's like, what are we so damn afraid of? Like, why is this right to comfort such a thing? And I think that's the one that and defensiveness are the two like symptoms of white supremacy culture that really speak to me the most. Like, why is it so hard for white people to get uncomfortable? It is, but it's like the craziest phenomenon ever. Like, it's almost comical to watch if it wasn't so traumatizing and dangerous and everything bad. But it is so ridiculous that there is this notion that I shouldn't have to get uncomfortable. Like, yeah, like you're saying, like all these things until it actually like hurts me. And I'll like ask people to do free webinars and free put together like panels on racism for free. But then when I actually have to like pay for the anti-racism training for my company, I don't know if I want to do that. I've experienced some of that as well. So what are some things, like maybe 3 things that you think that you wish that white people did or said differently in terms of race or anti-racism? Or
Wow,
maybe 5, if you want to choose 5.
I don't know. I guess I never thought of it in terms of even to like number it. I guess I'll just kind of spitball an answer here,
Yeah.
but
Take it where you want to take it.
I think I'd like to see people be more outspoken, or advocates to be more outspoken. Um, at a certain level, it's really cool that you can have white friends, and they love you, and they'll do anything for you. But when it comes to the next phase of that, bringing you to their house or something, a lot of times you can run into that where it's cool to see you at the gym, it's cool to see you at work. I don't know if I would invite you into my house. And that's kind of one of the tests that I have.
It's so real. It's like what you're talking, and we talked about this when I was on your podcast. Like, yeah, I was friends with these people at school, but there was no like socializing. And I wasn't like they asked me and I said no, or I asked them and they said no. We just didn't do it.
Right.
So weird. But
Well,
yeah.
how can you bond in a place where there are limits on those interactions or standards? Like if you go to the gym, it's a gym, it's a public place, and certain things are cool and certain things are not. You go to work, there's protocols and things like that, and what's considered professional. And you can kind of strip that off when you see people on your own and they're on your patio and it's a barbecue and they can be themselves. And when Black people and people of color, when they're at work, there's something they have to be to survive. Yeah. I wish white people would understand that you're not getting that full person. You can be your full person. You can show up late. You can say things however you want to, because, hey, you're going to get a slap on the wrist, if at all. If someone else does it, and it's a person of color, then it means the implications are entirely different. And so for you to get to know them and to create those bonds, you have to do that outside of where we've, demarcated, like, this is cool for us to be together here. And no, right? And so that's one thing, right? Is like I need those people to speak up publicly, and the other half of that is privately. And we've all, black, white, whatever, when people are saying things and have said something that's racist and offensive and just wrong. And sometimes because we know them and we love them and we say, this is how they talk, they don't mean it. I think now more than ever that it's important to challenge that, because what we're seeing now is these words aren't empty. These are not empty, idle words where it doesn't turn into anything real. What we're seeing is, there was this Kyle Rittenhouse, the Kenosha 17-year-old. This is a guy who professed, Blue Lives Matter and, Trump and so on and so on. And we think, oh, it's just, this is his ideology and this is his understanding of the world. It doesn't mean anything. It's a Facebook post. And then kill some people, right? Then we're like, oh, okay. And so these things mean something. And because we think, and I'm sure people would have said Kyle's harmless. I'm sure his family would have said he's harmless. The same way you see someone in your family or your neighbor, oh, they're harmless. I've known them. I've worked with them. I think people aren't as harmless as we think. And it doesn't just have to be in demonstrable violence. It can be verbally. You could be in a position of power and those things can trickle in there and taint the water, right? It only takes like one drop of black ink to taint the entire cup. That's it. And so privately, we have to do more to squash that before it can get going. Because if you mean something to that person, like really, you're probably in the best position for people to listen to you. Compared to like somebody on CNN or whatever, they know you. And that's maybe why it should be your responsibility. So one A and one B of the same thing.
Yeah. It's so, I mean, what you said, you're not getting that full person. That has stuck with me. Like that is still, I'm like, I've heard everything you've said since then, but I'm like still kind of stuck back there too, because like we're not getting, society isn't letting Black human beings be who they are. And we're missing out on all of the like richness and nuance of people's personalities, because like you're saying, you can't be late, you can't, all these things. That's really powerful. And I don't know, like it maybe it's obvious, but for some reason that really just like is hitting me. We're it's literally crazy that white people don't make more attempts to like to strip down those barriers, and that we have them to begin with.
Mhm.
Okay, so thank you for sharing that. Any other things?
Other things, I think I wish, because all I really want is a broader perspective.
Mhm.
I wish more people would travel in a general sense, both Black and white and whoever. That's one of the things that's enriched my life in the way so much, is that, you know, I've traveled to like 30 plus countries. I've lived in 3 different ones. And I know what it's like to be Black. I won't say long term, but when you live somewhere for a year or two, you've been there. It's not vacation. Like, oh, you go to France for 2 days, and people like to be like, oh, I know, I'm French. Oh my God. But when you have to live there and do your laundry there and associate with people and watch those dynamics and be a part of that, it's something entirely different. And to be Black and all these other places I've been, South America, Europe, Asia, wherever, Middle East, I've never felt freer than when I'm outside this country.
Hmm.
And other people have made this distinction, but it's one that I said before, is that in America, you have to hyphenate. I'm African American. And whenever I'm approached abroad, it's just, are you American? They don't have that level of hatred and division, you know, that's entrenched in our society. They don't understand it from that because they don't live here, right? They understand it from like a very superficial view of looking at the news and seeing what's going on the BBC and so forth. If and let me say this, and it might be controversial, so be it. Um, because of the power structure here in this country, white people feel like they own this country, and they behave in that way. That's the point of the systemic racism, and that was the point of the whole thing, right? To legislate somebody and say you are less than this, and by law and decree, it is that way, and you can only do that from a position of power. Because things have been that way so long, and the youth have seen it, and history's been rewritten, you know, that revisionist history that's out there. When white people leave this country, they feel like they own other places too.
Mm.
And I've seen it. I've seen it everywhere I've been. And people will always say, you Americans, and they always make this distinction. Not you guys, because we don't act like, Black people don't act like we run another country, because we don't run where we are.
That's so interesting.
You know, we don't just walk into somebody else's house and tell you how to do, like, I'm going to walk into your house and you say, please take your shoes off. And you're like, no, not doing that. Like, it's a respect thing. And yet,
Yeah.
and so I think travel should be mandatory. I think it should be mandatory from the high school level. If you know, I know college, there are people already doing like, you know, semesters abroad and so forth. And that's great. I hope that continues. But I think it needs to begin at earlier stage. So people can realize that, hey, you don't run this whole show. You're a very small piece to the puzzle, and you are poisoning the well with this superiority complex. And I hate to say it that way, because I know I have friends and I love them to death, that they, in their hearts, they're not this way. but they've been raised to see and to believe and to behave in a way that supports what this country is. Of course, you can walk into a place and demand a seat. Of course, you can just walk straight through the line and nobody will stop you. They saw their parents do it, and their grandparents did it, and it's on television of them doing it. And for people of color, in your household, you're told, no, it's not that way. You watch the movies, no, it's not that way. You read the books, no, it's not that way. You go to work, no, it's not that way. And so how is anyone else to behave? And who's to show them? And I think one of the best ways is, instead of focusing on people in America to illuminate some of that, because we're all under this umbrella of this craziness, let's go somewhere else where that's not the case, where people have maybe some fresh eyes. And that's my thought on that.
I love that. I mean, I'm so guilty of it. Just what you're saying, I'm like, oh God, yes, and I'd like to think I'm not a big a-hole when I travel, but I'm sure I am. Like I try to be more mindful of it, but I'm quite sure that like there's so much that I could do differently and improve on. What are your thoughts about like people who don't have money to travel? Because I think it's such a valuable thing, but there's a lot of white folks, and Black folks, obviously, like there's a lot of people who can't afford to just like go see the world. What are some ways they can either get that experience elsewhere, or how are some ways that we can make travel like a reality for people who might not even think about it otherwise?
Yeah. I mean, travel is expensive, especially depending where you're trying to go. Obviously, the world's getting smaller, and though travel is getting cheaper, it's still not cheap, right? And so, to gain that experience and that diversity, I think people have to make a conscious effort and choice to enroll their kids in certain clubs or sports programs where they will have the opportunity to not only converse like with other people, but hopefully through those interactions, they get to see what it's like to hopefully befriend some people who are unlike themselves. And from there, be invited into someone's home. And from there, we can work from the inside, kind of, infiltrate that way. I mean, I love going, like here I live in Atlanta, and so I love Buford Highway. Buford Highway is known for international cuisine of like all varieties. And that's why I love it, because I feel like I'm out of America when I go. Yeah. And so, and my measure is always, if I go into the restaurant and they're not speaking English, or the menu's not in English, I'm in a good space.
Well, the right space, yeah.
But then again, there are people who are uncomfortable with that. And an example would be, I had a friend of mine, I'm not going to use his name here. I don't know if you watch this either way, but we went to an Ethiopian restaurant, Desta, over off like Claremont Road down there. And we got there, and it's all this Ethiopian food and stuff like that, and things we never tried. And I'm going down, like, I'm so excited to try things. So I'm going to get this. And I don't know what that's about, but I'm going to do that. And he literally goes, I forget what he ordered. I think it was like hot wings. And I was like, what? This is an Ethiopian restaurant? Only Ethiopian people work here? The whole menu except for like 3 things? And this is what you got? And isn't that indicative of or emblematic of our society, where we have so much diversity around us? If we open up our eyes and can get out of our comfort zone, with those creature comforts and those paths of least resistance are so ingrained and so entrenched in us that even when we go into diverse settings, like a high school cafeteria, kids of all kinds in there will still sit with people who look like us.
Yeah.
And I just think that's so interesting, and that we have to do more to be aware of that.
Yeah.
And that could be meditation, right? To open our minds to that.
I think, yeah, I mean, and I think, because you and I talked about this when I was on your podcast, like we all saw that the Black kids sat together in the school, in the cafeteria at my school, but like, I didn't understand why. And I didn't understand that that was like out of survival and out of like needing community. I thought it was like they just didn't want us around and they didn't want to. So I'm not going to try because I'm going to just like I'm just going to be like lame and interrupting. So I think if I had had the understanding of why that's a thing that happens, it would have changed my approach more. You know, it would have helped me understand and have a lot more compassion and empathy rather than just being like, okay, well, that's just the way it is. I love what you're saying about the food. I remember I was in Puerto Rico. One of my colleagues, when I first started my medical career, was Puerto Rican and like from Puerto Rico, and she had done her medical training in the U.S. And myself and another white colleague of mine and her, the three of us went and visited her family and traveled around a little bit. And I remember at some point, I don't drink coffee, but my friend we wanted to find a coffee shop. And she kept my Puerto Rican friend kept recommending places. And our other friend was like, no. And I probably was part of this too. No, I don't like the way that looks. And like finally found one that was basically like, and not Starbucks at all, but like a cute little like American looking coffee shop, like the same kind of place that we would want to go here.
Right.
It has like hummus and vegetables and that has this and that and like big open spaces. And I remember my friend getting so mad because she just said like, this is the same shit that you have all the time. Like, why are you even bothering? Why don't we just go to Starbucks? And I don't, until she said that, I didn't even make the connection that we were like, I think she tried like 5 places before we found one that was acceptable for my friend to get her coffee. And I'm not exempting myself from this, except that I don't drink coffee. So I can at least pretend that I wasn't horribly insular, but I'm sure I was. And that was a big aha moment of like, are we just looking to have American experiences outside of America to like reinforce what's cool and what's like, what makes a country interesting? I think the answer is yes, which is so wrong, but that's what a lot of us do.
Absolutely. Right. And I'm glad we had that shared experience there where we understand and we've seen that.
Yeah.
I think it's natural for people to seek to find themselves in foreign places. And yet, when we get there in those foreign places, the first thing I think we want to do kind of is retreat back into a place that is recognizable. And I think what the next step is understanding that you can find yourself in other people who are unlike yourself. If they're willing to brave those waters. You know, if you stay in the coffee shop that's different, right? And the smells are different, the sights are different, and everything else is different, the process is different. You might find some commonalities and some similarities there if you give it a chance. And I think what America is missing is that we're not looking for those opportunities to find those chances or to take chances, because it's just so natural for us to say, hey, this is what I know. This is what makes sense to me. I see that over there and it looks attractive. And I can say, oh, there's a woman over there, but she's Puerto Rican, but I only date Black women. I guess I'll never know. How many times have you seen people who are, I've been to clubs, you know, and danced all night with women of every race. And then I've literally had, you know, white women, Asian women, so on, come later on away from their friends and say, I think you're so attractive, da, 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 here's my number. But it's away from where they can see.
Wow, yeah.
You know, and so it's like, call me later, but I gotta go, you know, or here's all my white friends and I don't wanna hug you in front of them. I don't wanna give them this image but later right?
Yeah.
And you almost feel like a secret, this whole thing.
Like risky and I would never do anything about it. Yeah.
Right. You've reduced me. You've compartmentalized me, and you've dissected me into something that I'm not Nick Landers anymore. I'm a skin tone, or I'm my job, or an appendage, and on and on and on. And you go, but it's a compliment to some people, right? It's the same way it's a compliment to go to a foreign country and find a place that's like your own. Mm. And say, oh, instead of going to a place like we might go to somewhere and look at a McDonald's in Italy and go, I would never go to a McDonald's in Italy. And there's someone else going, oh, there's a McDonald's here. Let's go. Hoping that it will be different than home, but it's a franchise and the idea is for it to be the same no matter where you go.
Right.
Right. And so it's this delusion that's just, it's comical at some points, but I think that's the point. It's just.
It is. It's funny hearing you talk about like dancing in clubs. It just reminds me of like when I would travel through Europe and stuff, like I wouldn't eat McDonald's unless I was in a train station and or had a hangover. I was like, that's what I need right now to get me through the hangover. But like, it's just like, so funny to think about my like former life. But yeah, I mean, I was definitely conscious of like, hell no, not doing that. But like on travel day when there's not as many other options and they're not that good, like that's what I know is like going to hit the spot and feel comfortable. But a lot of people are just going to do that. For like, sure. You know, like I remember I dated someone whose friend came in town and he wanted to go to like Bubba Gump Shrimp Factory for dinner. Like, that's why do you want to do that? Like ever, but like, why when you're traveling to Chicago, is that where you want to go, you know, where there's like thousands of places to go. So it's a very interesting, is that the colonized mindset? Is that what that is? That like,
could, I mean,
I don't know if that's how it plays out or if that's a different thing. I'm just.
It's probably, if not, I mean, at the very least, it's probably derivative of
right. Yeah.
Because we'll have, I know like me and my Black friends sometimes, you know, and we'll look at white people and we'll call them like colonizers. Mm-hmm. And it's said in fun, but there's truth in jest, right? Yeah. And even in the movie Black Panther, you know, Shuri, you know, Black Panther's sister, mm-hmm. calls them colonizers. And I think what it shows is that, again, there's this mindset of, I like what you're doing and I want to take it. And it's my belief I can make it better. Mm. Right. And again, that's here, right? Everybody else who's been socialized and groomed, they understand. They're like, oh, this is not how we operate. We can't just walk into this place and say, here's the new rules.
Yeah.
Right. And what's her name? Adele, who had they got on her for cultural appropriation for having on like the Caribbean gear and all the other stuff.
I haven't heard about that, but yeah.
Yeah, it's maybe like a week or two ago.
Okay.
And again, that cultural appropriation of, we want to pick and choose the parts of your culture that we like, and we're gonna commodify it. We're gonna make some money off of it. And the part that hurts is that we're going to make money. I need listeners to understand this, what they're seeing. When you see basketball players, when you see the music, when you see the style and the urban wear and everything else, these same things you think are glamorous and stylish and amazing, it's cool when you wear it. It's cool when a certain segment of African Americans wear it because they're the face of that brand. They're the Steph Currys and LeBron James and Serena Williams and the Beyoncés of the world. But for your everyday people of color, they are demonized for the exact same thing you are praised for when you dung on somebody else's life, their living experience.
Well, yeah.
And so you can go out in a hoodie, and that same hoodie will get somebody killed.
Right.
You can go pop and lock and dance and do all your hip hop dancing because it's cool if a white person can dance like a Black person. Cool for you. Then a Black person dance like a Black person, and it's whatever. It's humdrum. It's normal. Mm-hmm. Right. The same thing doesn't work in the reverse. I need people to know that, because if I put on a suit, does that make me white? Does that make me cool? Or am I just a Black guy in a suit? Mm. You know, Kanye West told you, he says, you know, even if I get a Benz, I'm just a Black man in a coupe. The Benz doesn't make me anything. Me listening to John Mayer or Phil Collins or Matchbox 20 doesn't, and I love those bands, I love those people, but it doesn't make me white. I might get into some segments of society just because I like those things, but it doesn't augment me
Right.
in the same ways. And that's the part where people are saying, no, you can't wear your hair like this, and no, you can't do that. I know, but as long as you're going to penalize us for this, no, you don't get to enjoy it. And the power structure says, yeah, but you don't run anything, so we're going to keep doing it because there's nothing you can do.
What are ways that like white people can listen to rap and enjoy rap music and not be appropriating? Because I used to be like, I love hip hop, I love 1990s hip hop, and ew, like I did, but I think like I thought that made me cool also to like say that I liked it. So how can white people appreciate other cultures without appropriating them? What's the difference do you see? And you may or you may or may not have like a scientific answer for this, but just from your own personal experience, speaking as Nick Landers, what are your thoughts on that?
Again, I don't have any science for this, but the separation, the distinction, you can enjoy rap music. I think, like people, black people will say like, oh, rock and roll was taken from black people, the blues taken from black people, jazz, everything else, right? And when they make this music, the idea is for it to be powerful and influential, and it's designed to make you feel good. And so if somebody else other than black people or a black person enjoys it, the music has done its job. So if a white person or anybody else says, this is cool, I want to ride in my car and listen to it, I want to go to the gym and put my headphones on and listen to it, I want to get married to this song, yeah, do it. And black people kind of have to let go of that because certain things cross over. Sports crosses over. It doesn't matter who you are. That's why we love the Olympics. Mm-hmm. But when it bleeds into a place of, I am now profiting from your creation at your expense, I'm listening to this music, but I'm laughing at you. I mean, I'm hearing these jokes that are demeaning, and I'm laughing at them, and I'm not laughing with you. Then it goes into this dark area of, oh, I see what this is for you. It's the same thing with dating. Mm-hmm. You can say, I just like everything. And then it slides into another world where, oh, you just wanted children with pretty hair. Oh, you just enjoy the stereotype. That's all this was for you. Not true enjoyment, And I think that's, again, like I said earlier, when you're trying to pinpoint what exactly is racism, mm-hmm. You're kind of going, is this an example of that? Is this person leaving the gym and their Range Rover with their windows down, this white person blasting, some hip hop? Is that cultural appropriation? Do they just enjoy the song? And I think sometimes we have to take a step back and go, everything is not intended to harm somebody, or better said, everything is not about you. I wish even black people would understand that. Everything is not about black people. Everything's not about racism. Everything's not discrimination, folks. Black people do a great job of discriminating against themselves, stereotyping each other. Mm-hmm. And there's history and the remnants of slavery that have contributed to that, and colorism and so forth. But black people have, I want black people who are listening to know that we have work to do too. It's not white people need to do this so we can be free. No. I've had black people enslave me or trap me in what they think is blackness. But I also understand that most black people don't understand where they come from. And blackness is all that they have.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And so that they've created this idea of Blackness because there's no historical foundation to pull from. They can't say, I'm from Ghana, I'm from Ethiopia, I'm Kenyan. They don't know that.
Yeah.
Even if they went to ancestry.com and discovered that. What does that mean to you? It's very kind of empty.
Yeah.
And so that's the crux of it, isn't it? It's just everybody has this job to do.
Mm-hmm.
And the main job is to take a step back and say, is this about me? Am I making this about me? Because a lot of people love to do that, don't they? They love to see something on TV and throw themselves into it and act like they have a dog in that fight, and they don't.
Yeah.
But they want to be hurt, want to be a victim. Sometimes it's best to just be an observer. And that's the best place to be sometimes. Like, obviously, if something happens, that's an injustice and you need to speak up about it and you witnessed it and things like that, and speak up, of course. But sometimes it's okay to just see someone wearing a bandana or a dashiki or whatever and let them live. I don't know.
Like, I'm hearing you, but I'm also like, but I'm assuming you mean a white person wearing a dashiki or a bandana. Yes?
Yeah, it's context matters, right? Who, what, when,
Yeah.
where, why.
But like, I still want that. As a white person hearing you say that, I'm still like, yeah, but if they're doing that in a way that's like appropriating or harmful, like the experience of the person, their experience of that, I think I want to give validity to that, whether or not they should or shouldn't let it just go. It's like that repeated time after time after time trauma that affects how you see something that may just be a white person wearing a dashiki. You know what I mean? So I do want to, from my perspective, like yours is obviously yours, but I think from my perspective as a white person, for any white person listening, I do want to be clear that like, if someone who's Black responds to something and you're like, it doesn't feel like congruent with what you're doing,
right?
Always remember there's a history that comes before that, and then it's also probably true that you're doing something that's ignorant. You know what I mean? So I do want to put that out there.
No, I understand completely. I think I do get what you're saying. And kind of looking off for someone to sign off on what exactly is what. Going back to what Drake said, if you say you're down, you got to show me.
Yeah.
Certain people in whatever it is you're doing, you have to be visible in those communities. That's going to allow you, it's going to give you a pass, right? That's your ticket in. If this is your first time in this neighborhood and you just showed up and you're saying all this, pump your brakes. Whoa.
Yeah.
Because I need to see your resume. What were you doing 1, 2, 3 years ago or 5 weeks ago? Because now when you show up like this, we can pull your resume and go, oh, that's Julia. Oh my God, like, stop. Like, we know her.
Yeah.
What you have is people on the other side, when they're appropriating it, they're doing things without any sort of representation. They have no connection to it. It's just superficial. It's temporary. It looks good on my Instagram. And that's as far as it goes. And Black people and people of color are very good at sniffing that out, and going, that's genuine and that's not. So if you're doing it from a place of real love and you have skin in the game, do it. Because Black people aren't haters. They're really not. You can go into a Black club right now, a Black church, nobody's going to turn you around. Yeah. Like, that's not how that's going to go. You show up at a barbecue, like, if you're cool, you're cool. Yeah. It's not always the same way, the other way around. Yeah.
Wow. Well, this has been awesome. I feel like we could go on all day. But thank you so much, Nick, for having me. This is stuff that people need to hear, and saying the things that need to be said, and sharing your view on the world and what you've experienced, and how we can all start to be better. I think, it's very inspiring, and I learned so much from all of these interviews, but in different ways, which I love. And I think, before the interview, we weren't exactly sure where we were going to go with the interview. And I think it's great because there's like a lot of questions that people have. It's like, well, how do I like do this but not be in the wrong? And I like what you're saying. You just need to, like, if your authenticity is there, it's going to come through.
Mm-hmm.
And your way to show that you're down is not to, like, I was just thinking about, my boyfriend likes heavy metal, some metal. He likes all types of music, and I'm not really a metal fan, but I went to this one concert with him, and I wore like a red shirt and something, and he was like, "Oh, you have to wear all black to these shows." And I'm like, so I did, like, you know what I mean? I ended up there, and I was wearing a bright color, and everyone else was wearing black, and I kind of wish I had known beforehand, but it's like, I have to change myself to try to fit into this thing that I'm not, to go and be part of it. And why can't I just show up as myself and not look like I'm a metal person? I'm so not a metal person at all. Like, I barely tolerated being there. Like, here, the music was like fine, but like, so it's just interesting. Like, even non-racial, like, is like, that's kind of like a white culture kind of place. And even in that, there's this like lack of authenticity that people think they have to look or be a certain way in order to partake in something. And I just am like, I'm going to be thinking about this all weekend. So thank you so much for all sharing your insights and your knowledge. How can people find you? You have a podcast, so talk about that. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. But
No.
find you and go from there.
Okay. Well, yeah. First thing. I'm so glad we can have these conversations and be open, and being as open as we are. I really, that's a real treat for me because we're kind of figuring it out as we're going, and feeling all the nerves. Putting it out there. But I do have a podcast. You're right. It's called Finding Nicholas. It's available on Apple, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, all those different platforms. I'm on Instagram at Teacher in Your Pocket. I'm on YouTube at Teacher in Your Pocket. I have a couple books online on Amazon, one designed for teachers and others for like young adults, teens. And all those links are like contained on my different handles, I guess, but my website, nicklanders.squarespace.com. You can find it there, and you can book me or whatever you want to do. But yeah, this was fun.
Awesome. I'm just making all these notes, so I'll be sure to include them. Nick, thank you again. Have an awesome weekend. And I know our conversation will continue in different ways. So thanks again for joining me.
Awesome. Thank you, Jill.